from Auger Insights. A few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Rosemarie Truglio, Senior VP of Curriculum and Content at Sesame Workshop. As part of a session at the Children's Media Conference, I had the chance to speak with her about the current state of edutainment, the challenges of creating global content that also speaks to unique cultural needs, and how the brand has managed to retain its experimental focus over the course of its 55-year history. It's a fun, fascinating conversation, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Dr. Truglio, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. First of all, do you mind telling me a bit about yourself and your work with Sesame Workshop?
Sure. I'm the Senior Vice President for Curriculum and Content at Sesame Workshop. And as a developmental psychologist, my responsibility is to identify what are the current educational needs of children, and then to create the curriculum and then implement the curriculum across our media content platforms.
Why do you think that as kids media makers, it's particularly important for us to be thinking about edutainment in 2024?
You know, as media creators, we have an amazing opportunity to tell meaningful and relevant stories to children. And these stories are important because it gives them an opportunity to learn about themselves. So to see themselves in these stories, to learn about others, to build resiliency skills. This is a tough world, but we know children are tougher if we give them the skills and the strategies to manage their emotions. To learn about how they learn. And I love that because we want children to be lifelong learners, and media could inspire them to be interested, to pique their curiosity, to find out more, and that have that sense of joy and wonder about learning.
I really like how Joan Ganz-Cooney has described Sesame Street's inception as this experiment. It feels like this attempt to capture the power of TV to connect and inspire children in the 1960s. For me, it feels that it kind of brings this feeling of both adventure and scientific rigor to what's been going on at Sesame Street and Sesame Workshop more broadly. About, I guess, 55-ish years on, do you feel like that experimental spirit is still present in the content at Sesame Workshop that you're producing?
Absolutely. In fact, there was this big internal joke. It's like every year we say it's the experimental year. It's like, well, it's 50 years and we're still using experimental. And that's critical. That's important because we are a research-driven company. And Joan has another quote that I love, is that we all have expertise within our domains, right? Me being a developmental psychologist, a writer or a musician or an animator. But the real experts are the children themselves. So it is critical for us to test our ideas and see what's working and what's not working. Because what we know about television is that we can't teach them if we don't engage them. So we need to make sure that the stories we're telling are engaging and meaningful and relevant for them to lean in and to play along, so to speak, with our characters, because these characters are their friends. They develop what we call a parasocial relationship with our characters. And it's through that relationship that learning becomes meaningful for them. And that's when it's most impactful in terms of learning goals.
Speaking of engaging kids, Sesame Workshop is now engaging kids across a range of media beyond TV, but you're also connecting with young people around the world in a range of different countries and different kind of cultural centers. How do you balance those macro and micro perspectives, creating content that speaks both to kind of global audiences, but also creating stuff that recognizes the nuances of different countries' cultural needs and perspectives?
Yeah, that's a really important question because we are in 150 countries. And from an educational and a child development point of view, there are more commonalities than there are differences when you're looking at the critical needs of children. But as we are delivering, there's an example of now implementing that curriculum to address a critical educational need, you want to make sure that the characters resemble and have meaning for the children in that country, right? Getting back to they want to be able to relate to these characters so that they are friends with the characters. So we have to make sure that there's cultural relevance because children are smart. They're going to look at that content if it's just imported from another country and say, this is not for me. This is not relevant for me. And that's why we have these co-productions, to make sure that there is cultural relevance and there's that nuance. So there might be some educational areas or domains where you want to hone in on a very specific learning objective, because that's what the children in that country are needing the most. So, for example, for Ahlam Simpson, our work in the Middle East, the importance of labeling emotions. They didn't have the rich emotional literacy that children need to build these resiliency skills. So there was an importance for us to lean in on developing their emotional vocabulary, as well as developing the skills to help them, or the strategies to help them manage their big feelings.
Critics, I guess Neil Postman is probably most famous in this space, but there have been, a few other people more recently. These critics have argued that content that blends education and entertainment could potentially be more harmful than helpful when it comes to young people. They argue that it takes away the responsibility from parents to teach their kids, encourages passive learning, and casts learning as this kind of generally unpleasant, bitter medicine, something that we should be tricking young people into consuming. What's your response, I'm curious, to people who may share these feelings in 2024?
Neil was always an instigator and always pointed out the negative impact that media could have on children. And we all know that not all media are the same. Their content matters, and so there's good content and bad content, and there are good uses and not so good uses of media. So when parents are using it as a babysitter, it may not be the best use of media unless they're watching quality educational content such as Sesame Street. But what we've learned through our research and through having a better understanding of our educational impact is that parents and caregivers learn so much from the media that we create. Media that we create for children, but we also create media for caregivers through our digital platforms, because parents are turning to us for the language to help them explain tough topics or difficult topics with their children. As we're working on emotional well-being, they are turning to us for these mindfulness strategies. They are learning too. So here's an example of, we're focusing on children, but how do we create media so that parents could co-engage, and that Sesame Street has always welcomed the adults in their lives. There are some shows where parents would say, that's a show for my child. Now I could walk away, and the show is the babysitter. But there are shows such as Sesame Street, because it is a community and we do have a human cast, that they will lean in and they'll say, oh, I'm learning too. But more importantly, when the show is over, how do they extend these lessons? So I think that is a powerful use of children's television.
Thank you again so much for taking the time to chat with me today, Dr. Truglio. It's been really interesting just hearing your thoughts on all these questions. I'm curious, what's next for you and Sesame Workshop generally?
Well, we're going to continue to learn. We're going to continue to address the needs of kids and families, because we have this, what we call a circle of care. So it's the children, it's the trusted adults in their lives, their parents and caregivers, and we're always looking to find out what are the most critical, either an educational need or a societal need or a health need or a mental health need, that we want to be able to figure out, what can we do? What is our role in addressing this critical educational need in children's lives?
Dr. Truglio, thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. This was a wonderful conversation to have with you. So thank you for inviting me to chat with you.
Thanks again to Dr. Truglio for taking the time to sit down with me. And for those of you who are interested in the subject, I highly recommend picking up Dr. Truglio's book, Ready for School, A Parent's Guide to Playful Learning for Children ages 2 to 5. That's all from me. Take care. We'll speak soon.